So you have to cut trees to grow trees. You have to cut oak trees to grow acorns, and you have to cut trees to grow deer.
And most any wildlife.
And every other kind of wildlife.
Kind of a little funny add-on to this property here. When I walked around with the guys that were logging it, they kept walking up to trees and saying, hey, this is hollow on the bottom. This tree's hollow, blah, blah, blah. I was like, how are all these trees hollow on the bottom? Oh, you had a fire come through, here's what it was. You had a fire come through the property in the past and it burnt the bottom of these trees. I said, well, that's interesting because I've been taking fire classes to burn timbers, and it's called a code fire in a timber. And I said, I just haven't heard that that was a problem, burning the trees bad enough that all these big ones are hollow at the base, right? Yeah. And so here I go to a burn in Illinois to help them do a timber burn, and I'm asking the guys in charge, they're like, no. I was like, I paused, that's what two different loggers, well, what it was, they was taking their skidders in the past when they would cut this, right? And knocked the bark off of all those maple trees, it's the ones that were mainly hollow, and so they damaged them all. Well, I think that these loggers knew when they were talking to me about fire, but because they were going to log it, they didn't want to say anything about damaging future timber, you know what I'm saying? So they told me a different story, right? And then just to make it to where they didn't look bad when they damaged trees or whatever. And again, it's just manipulating you is what they done. They done to me about money is what it was about, you know, I mean, at the end of the day.
I generally think it's a mistake to go to a logger and have him come into your woods and tell you what value the trees have and decide which ones to go out. That's for sure a bad idea. You're going to get taken advantage of 9 times out of 10. A forester, you have a lot better chance of having him mark trees to produce a healthy woods, but he may have relationships with people
100%.
Too. Yeah. The way I did my 43-acre property in Branch County, I think it was 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I got a local guy who had a skidder, and he has one crew member. He's his own logging company, and he came in and we reached an agreement that we would cut all these trees down, use my field for a staging area, and after we got everything done for a certain portion of the woods, we'd call in bidders and they'd come in and bid on the logs, and we split it 60-40. We both made lots of money, and I didn't get taken advantage of. I knew what I had.
So the state of Wisconsin, out of all my travelings now of like 15 years and working with all these foresters, the state of Wisconsin, their timber management program, their MFL up there, they're pretty strict. And so guys constantly had their foresters come out while I was there, right? To make sure I wasn't going to violate any of these here contracts they had and they was going to be in trouble over it, right? And so I learned so much from dealing with all these foresters all the time because they're telling me exactly how they wanted it and I'm telling them how I need it. And so we was able to come up with a good compromise, right? And so, just exactly what you're saying is it, right? Drag them out to a field, because nobody knows. When you're standing looking at the tree in the woods, nobody knows what that tree is going to be like when it's laying on the ground and it's cut. We don't know if it has damages on the inside. We don't know when it comes down if it's going to bust or, you know. And so when the logger comes in and gives you an idea of what you're going to make.
You write up a contract with him to give him a certain amount of money. You've given him complete control over your life from there forward. And 90% of the time he's going to take advantage of that.
But the method that you were talking about is the method that the guys in the foresters in Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin uses. It is the absolute best method.
You're going to get the best because they're going to outbid each other.
Now, if you would have a good forester involved in that also that had all the contacts for the buyers, right? To where you could get 50 buyers to come in there, right? And so what I've also learned is, you know, it's great to have a gravel parking lot for those buyers to park in and grass out there so they don't have to walk around in mud, right? Because they're going to get back in their fancy car and go back to the motel room and they don't want all that, right? And so there's little ways to improve what you're saying to get even more people in, to make more bids and all that. But so I was working a property this last year up in Minnesota, and it was a little over 1,000 acres, and they was having a 200-acre clear cut done on it, right? And up in northern Minnesota, it's pretty low timber value up there. He had 42 different markets that those logs were going to, right? That's how you get your money. That's business.
That's
you know
how
what I'm saying?
Top dollar. Not having some local schmuck come in and tell you, oh, that tree's worth $100 and that one's worth $200, and then he's going to go sell the $200 tree to a veneer company for $1,000.
Yeah, and he has two markets.
Yeah.
He has one that's going to do pallets, and it might be an Amish sawmill, and then he's got a veneer market,
Right.
and he don't do anything else. And he might have lost markets in the past because of relationship problems with these different companies and whatnot. But the company that will spend their time looking for these wood markets is going to get you more money, and that's how
We ended up with one guy buying almost all the top grade lumber from some distance away and outbidding everybody on everything because he was willing to pay.
Well, but he might have needed at the
that.
time to keep his
Right.
guys going or his meal going or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I've messed up just like what you're saying on getting loggers to come in,
I
right?
did too, yeah.
And so what I learned is if you're going to have a piece, another way to do it is to find the closest sawmill, right?
Yes.
And talk to the closest sawmill because again, their hauling distance is very expensive for them.
Yes, it is.
You know?
Trucking.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they're usually going to pay more depending on how many logs they got laying in their yard at the time and all that, right?
Here's another thing I negotiated with this guy. By the way, his name's James Gay. You can call him up here, up in Branch County, Michigan, and he kind of likes, you know, doing the deer hunting property because he's a deer hunter.
Right.
And he enjoys deer hunting, and he enjoyed learning from me about the different things I was doing on my property. But we also negotiated up front. Yeah, you're going to take out as much pallet wood as you can get at.
Yeah.
I want all these trees cut. But he's making 40%
Right.
off of that. So, you know, he did that. And also, we walk through and I say, this is probably going to be a bedding area, this high ground right here. I don't want any tops laying in there.
Yeah.
I want you to drop them into that little low spot over there. And then on the other side, you drop those trees and land them all on top of each other. And we called that a waste zone.
Yeah.
And so put them in, and he was willing to do that. He felled the trees into areas where they wouldn't interfere with my activities.
I've tried to explain that, and I can rarely get that to happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can get the skidder guys.
He had an eye for it because he's smart enough and he understood what I was trying to do. And so you need to negotiate.
Well, in a team like that that understands the goals is the answer, right?
Mm-hmm. And he also understood the importance of, you know, tearing things up with the skidder and all that. But he did a good job. There's one area that's still recovering 5 years later, but but it turned into a pond, so that's not so bad either.
I got one of those up too up here with the skidder trail also. No, skidders can do a lot of damage, and they can do a lot of damage that you cannot fix because they get off of their logging roads and pulling those trees, and you can't get equipment in there afterwards if you don't jump in there immediately, and it can be too time consuming. So all that can be put in the contract also, right? Like cleanup, and you can get logging roads put in certain spots, but all that's going to take away from the amount of money you're going to make. But it still could be cheaper than bringing another company in to do your roads, because roads are incredibly important to access around on the place.
So not only did we do this, but we didn't have a contract. We just shook hands and looked each other in the eye, and we're both pool players in a local pool playing community, and he's not going to screw me over.
Well,
yeah. You're going to tell me a bad experience?
No, I'm going to tell you that's the best thing every time is to look somebody in the eye and be able to shake their hand, right? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It is. Yeah. And so you get. And
he did everything he said.
Those big old thick, lengthy contracts. They're that way so that they can manipulate things. Yeah. Yeah, that's the reason there's so many words in them, right?
Oh, you didn't notice this? Line number 256 in clause 42.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in those contracts, let's talk real quick about the different things that the guy could have put in them. And one of them is, I don't want you in there during season cutting.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times it's a 2-year contract. Some you can get for a 1-year, 2-year contract. But I don't want you in there during hunting season. I don't want you in there when it's wet and you're going to leave big ruts. I want you to clean up afterwards.
And those are all things we talked about.
Right.
Although I didn't want as much cleanup as a lot of guys do.
Right.
I wanted those waste areas.
I guess what I mean by cleanup is cleaning off the logging roads so I can still access through there.
Yeah.
I had one of my first properties I had, the way it was logged, they called it nuked it. And it was a property that they had used during the wet season to keep their guys busy when they couldn't be on landowners' property that they was going to tear up with the mud and everything, right? So they'd start at the back of the property and they just drop them whatever way. And as they roll out through there, right, all the logging roads are closed off for the most part. They don't care, right? And so when they get out, I mean, you can't get through it in about 3 years, right? And so those are a lot more work. And that's, you know, if you can get access back in there and get started, you know, that's hugely important before it gets so thick that you can't, and you're spending your time just cutting through brush. To get to your workstation.
Well, I spend a lot of time doing that.
Well, I hear you. I'm trying to use as much chemical on those things as I possibly can now because I don't have the time. And
so, Colin, have you done like a 360 here to show the contrast? This probably used to look just like that.
100%.
Right? Yeah.
So this is that
log. This is Colin Koskinen talking, who is our cameraman today and also a habitat guy who helps people with their land.
And has helped me on clients' properties in the past, and is an extremely knowledgeable guy.
Well, I learned from the best.
Well, you knew so much.
So this is just a beautiful example of where deer don't want to be in there and where deer do want to be during daylight.
The diversity, you know, in there, what they can reach, right,
is almost nothing.
Yeah, I mean, there might be in there might be 20 plants, right? Because of the shade and what they've ate the good stuff.
On the edge, of course,
right, we got more. You get in this and the diversity.
Huge diversity.
Yeah, I don't know if there would be 200 different plants on my property, but when I put in 42 that weren't here before, right? And then I'm doing a 14 plant mix on the cover crop seed, and then I'm doing my perennial seeds as the base there. And so we're talking probably close to 70 seeds in just that, right? And so, I mean, I don't know how much, I'm still finding plants that I don't know, and I'll get out my app, you know, and of course, I don't have much signal on here, so I got to wait till I get back home to figure out what it was.
But there's nothing over here for them, and really, if this was isolated, and probably when you first came in here, you didn't have all this diversity of species that we see here. We see probably 15 different kinds of trees that are this tall right here, so they can choose which ones they want to browse on. They're not there not because seeds aren't popping up, but in an area like that, they'll take out every maple tree. I've walked through woods like that. And you walk around, and the guys say, how come no trees grow under here? Well, they do. There's a tree, 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 and they've all been eaten to the ground.
They sprout, they have enough energy out of that seed to get up, put a couple of leaves on.
They put their head above the ground, the deer chews it up.
It lasts about a year, maybe 2 years, and then it's done. I was on a property in Kentucky in the mountains, and I was walking around, the ground was just all little oak trees, right? I mean, it was just covered, right?
No deer there, huh?
And I'm like, man, look at all these little bitty oak trees, right? It's like, what in the world? I don't understand. How come none of them's bigger, right? And so the guy said, well, the forester come out and he cut that one off, and he took his knife and he whittled it into a point. He said, these are 17 years old, is what he counted in the rings. And he had to do it to a point so he could even see the rings because they were so tight together, right? But there was no sun, just enough sun that those things could stay alive. And then the deer was eating on the tops of them, right? And so they couldn't get up. And I mean, they would never produce a healthy, mature tree, right? It's just too many years of being stunted.
Massive amounts of forest in northern Michigan that is just denuded like this. And guys say, how come nothing grows under there? Well, shade-resistant plants do grow, but they can't survive high deer populations.
And they're not high-quality browse.
This here can support deer indefinitely. I mean, they have a banquet here, and the other beauty of it is species that don't normally survive deer browsing can grow here. So that's where the diversity comes from.
Want to walk on?
Cool stuff, man.
So we'll go up the line here just a little bit, and then this this will be my access to a stand site on up here at the corner. So the last couple of years, I was able to come in through the neighbor's property to this stand that we're going to, and then he sold it. And so this area right now, the Amish are moving in. right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I know. Right? So I got an Amish guy that just bought a 340-acre property out on the highway, and then I got an Amish guy that bought ground right beside my other property. So I know for a fact that the land value is going to go up here.
I got to take this call. It's the guy that's cutting trees.
So, remember me telling you about the pinch point that when I shot the 170 that I went through it, he went through it? Well, it's right over here, and it's at the top of this ditch that comes down through here, behind this here stand I put in, right?
On the other side of that?
Yes. And so, well, the pinch point's over here a little more, probably about 125 yards from here. But those deer were coming on my access trail over there, the way I was going to get in on the south
this is
line.
the stand that you shot him from?
No.
No?
No, it's on over here.
Okay.
So I'm trying to...
This is a difficult one to hunt.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
It's right on top of bedding, right? But our road's right
But it's
here.
also at ground level with the hill.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, there's many problems
You're going to
with
get swirling winds.
Oh, you're going to have all kinds of issues, right? But again, what my plan to hunt this, and the wind's going to be blowing right here to this trail. When I hunt it, it's going to be a west, northwest, but it's going to be a morning situation, and it's not going to be over hunted. I'm saying maybe 3 to 4 times a year, right? Once I start getting the pictures, but yes, I'm going to have to be at the top of my game on scent control here.
Absolutely, yeah.
But about most of the time, because the neighbor's crop is way out there, and then I got that big old long travel corridor of food all the way through it, and it ends here. And so those people that, all that land on that side of the road over there, those deer are naturally coming through this corner over here. And so what I'm trying to do is to pull the deer to this side of this and access in this way, and it just being a morning sight for a little bit to where I don't have to come into the property.
So you're coming in from the corner of the property?
No, I'm coming in actually. So see, you can see there's a field out here, right? And so just on this side there's a driveway there, and I asked those people if they mind if I walk back their driveway, right? And they said not a problem. And so I don't do it except just to walk in. I'm not driving up and down it or anything. And they have a pipe to come across that deep ravine back there, but I already talked to them about buying their piece. They got 30 acres there, and they said not yet. But anyways, it just gives me a great access all along that south line, and I hate to just wear it out when they hunt back there also, you know what I'm saying? And they seem like really good neighbors to have. So. But, yeah, it's not an easy spot to hunt, but when we come around here, this whole side of the property, probably don't remember from that map up there, but it has points coming from this field over here.
Yeah, I remember.
And so what's happened is, as they travel back through here, it's busted up their travel corridors. And so
they got 3 ravines that can go.
All spread out, right? And I'm trying to concentrate that activity
right through here.
Yeah. You know, total on this whole property, I'm really not expecting to be on here hunting at more than 30 to 40 hours the entire season, right? If you take 40 hours out of all the hours in the entire year, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's not very much.
It's a very, I mean, is it 1% or 2%? It's very low percentage, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, a lot of people talk about how I put food. I put a lot of food around my property. But again,
I do exactly the same thing.
It doesn't seem to hurt my hunting.
Any of these trails I'm walking along, like I've got rye on every one of these types of trails this year.
And so on this, you know, I mean, I ran the dozer through here, but all that stuff right there is about as good as it can get. And you'll see, here's an example where something's disturbed this soil. But when you get down into that, you can tell by the seeds, look, they barely sprouted there on top of that type of soil, right?
Right.
But on this hasn't been disturbed here. I mean, look at the density of vegetation there. And again, I haven't had to do anything. You know, there was no prep. This here has had no fertilizer yet. It's had no lime. But that stuff on top is the special plant available food you know, to where I can get them going. I'll hit it in the spring. What I'm going to do is I'll come through and knock my competition out in the spring, and then I'll just have my rye and winter wheat.
So you're shooting mainly to this?
Well, I think I think my main shot's going to be straight behind you there, probably on
that road
one.
there.
Is what I think is going to happen, but we'll just see, right? Again, this was all just thrown in last week. Never been set, but. So, Roundup Ready alfalfa is what all this small stuff here is. And so in this situation, my typical Roundup Ready alfalfa planting is I come through, I spray it with Roundup, obviously, liquid fertilizer, then I'll spray it with liquid calcium, and then I'll put the Roundup seed down without tilling the soil, and then I'll come back 3 weeks later and do the same exact thing again. Roundup, liquid fertilizer, and depending on what the plants are looking at, I gotta be careful with my calcium because I can burn them when they're real small. But I've had like no failures ever in Roundup Ready food plots, right? No matter the weather or anything, because this is more exposed because I brought the dozer through here, but I'm saying I'll do grass or anything and not even touch it, right? Not mow it or anything, just throw that seed in. For some reason, that Roundup Ready alfalfa, nothing else can grow because I keep hitting it with Roundup, but it has been developed in a way that it's extremely aggressive, or I don't know.
Interesting. I've never used it.
It sends a root down that's unbelievable, and so many people talk about the first frost, it goes dormant. I got pictures on my Missouri place, November, December, January, February, and March, right? And you rake back the snow, and the crown of that alfalfa is going to have little bitty green little. This time in November, I mean, I'll have standing dead dormant alfalfa, like standing hay, and then the sprouts are coming off, and because this is protecting it from the frost, and then the sprouts just keep coming up off of it.
So if you ever wanted to kill it off, you could use 2,4-D?
Yes, but I mean, from everything I'm seeing, I think it's my #1 plant. It produces more volume than anything else. It's the easiest thing I can do, and it overseeds very, very well, right? So I can come in the fall, do the 14 plant mix or whatever that is from green cover, and it comes right up through it, right? And most clover plots, like we've seen that one over there, it doesn't overseed very well if the plants are too dense in there. Alfalfa gets big and tall and bushy, and so you always have voids.
You're going to probably come in and mow it in the summer?
I don't mow anything.
No.
I would probably if I had the equipment to do it. My alfalfa in Missouri has never been mowed in 3 years, right? And everybody says, oh, you got to mow it every 28 days or they won't mess with it. No, what actually happens is that top comes up and it blooms and that whole top dies in the summertime. And so the whole top's standing there dead and it just comes from the bottom. All tender and ready again. I didn't have to mow it, right? And
okay, I know what I'm going to be trying next year.
I didn't take the nutrients out by baling it and hauling it all away, right?
Yeah.
When you go into an alfalfa field and you do 5 or 6 years of baling and hauling off every 28 days,
not only that, but you got fertilizer machines coming through and using that specifically because it's here.
Yeah.
So they're digesting it.
Oh, 100%.
And putting it back into the soil.
100%. Yeah. And I'm producing nitrogen with the alfalfa. I'm producing more vegetation, carbon, than any other plant that I can put on this trail in the woods. And now, since I don't mow to keep my weeds down because I don't have the equipment or the time during the season, I run through here once or twice a year with my liquid fertilizer and Roundup, and that's my only maintenance. So I've cut my work way down. Then I can spray this side back when it starts getting aggressive, you know.
So tell us about your liquid fertilizer. What is it? Where do you get it?
Right. So
how do you apply it?
So my liquid fertilizers, I messed around forever trying to haul granular fertilizer around, right? And I don't know what percentage of clay is in granular fertilizer, but I think it's probably about 80% of the bag is clay. And so I'm trying to do the math on weight and everything, you know, and guys kept telling me, oh no, that liquid fertilizer, it don't have any longevity. It's used up real quick, right? And so I got a hold of one of my clients that sells chemical and fertilizer, and he says, oh, I got this nitrogen stuff that's a 3-week. It's 3 different types of nitrogen, and it's a time release. And he says, man, that's probably something you want to try. And I said, okay, but what about the clover fertilizers? Do you have any liquid that would do good for clovers? He says, well, what all do you want in it? I said, I want some nitrogen in it no matter what, because I get a lot of leaves in the timber, and when I hit those leaves with nitrogen, they decompose and eat up and they're gone, right? And I ain't got to leaf blow them off, so it saves me some work, and it builds my
But
soil.
also will deteriorate stumps over time. Yeah.
Right. Nitrogen, right? I mean, so there's a carbon-nitrogen ratio that you should have to have healthy soil, and that's 30-to-1, right? Very few people do. And what happens in a clover plot that I believe, and this is my theory, not fact, but usually a clover plot about year 4 or 5, they quit using it very much. For some reason, the attraction goes way down on it. And what I think it is the clover's producing so much nitrogen, that nitrogen's eating the organic matter out of the ground. And when it's taking that black stuff out of the ground, that soil is compacting, right? And when it's compacting, it's not as healthy. It's not getting the air in there. It don't have the life in there. And so I think...
So now how do you determine that you got the right ratio?
Well, I'm not positive. But over and over on healthy soils, they kept saying, you need grasses, you need grasses. And I'm like, I don't want grasses on my property, right? But the main reason they kept saying it was the root system and the volume of carbon that grasses make, right? And so I started thinking, well, that's all of our winter wheat, rye grain, and all that, right? Is your carbon.
Right, you're putting carbon back in.
Exactly, and that's the reason.
Which isn't happening in ag fields. So,
no.
And a lot of the information we have comes from agriculture.
Almost all of it.
And we're doing things completely different.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, you know, the reason we originally in ag fields deep plowed, chisel plowed, and all that different stuff is to reduce competition, you know. And so once we reduce the competition and destroy this here special stuff on top, now we got to put the seed down in the ground 8 times the width of the seed to keep moisture, because this is our moisture holding stuff. All this here little broken up leaves and sticks, that's what holds moisture, right? So that stick right there, you know, it was holding moisture underneath. Anything you lay on this soil, leaves or anything, as the soil breathes, it captures that moisture and holds it there, right? Well, if I come in here and most of the leaves are gone off of this, and the time of the year is good because my temperature's down and I got more moisture this time of the year in September, October. But if I come in here in the summertime and peeled the top off of this with no leaves and let it get 95 degrees and no rain, it would hurt this soil bad. And if I try to do this method then, I'm going to have issues, even though I still have some of this, because I've taken all of this here that's trapping the moisture that's coming out of the ground off, right?
But you're talking about deep tilling with a plow, not shallow
Well,
tilling.
no, I'm talking about just running across here and taking this here stuff off the top of the ground. It dries it out and damages the soil because I don't have the moisture there for that stuff to stay alive, and it heats that soil up bad. The more debris we have, as long as we can get our seed to the soil is all I'm after, the more debris I have on top, the healthier these plants are going to end up, and the more moisture I'm going to retain in the soil. And right now, you won't be able to see it, but there's little voids in this soil all over the place where life exists, right? And when we go do that deep till or disc, in a short period of time, what we got is a hard crust on top. That stuff settles back down in a random manner. That's a mat of soil instead of a live soil. Now, don't get me wrong. The timber here, I could deep till this a couple of times the first year for sure, and my soil would still be extremely healthy. And the reason is we've had maybe hundreds of years of this stuff accumulating on top,
here.
right?
Yeah, leaf matter and all that.
Which we don't have out in the fields anymore. But
that adds acidity as well, doesn't it?
It does, yes. It definitely does. And all of our timbers are low on pH
Yeah.
compared to the plants that we're personally wanting to grow for deer.
Yeah.
For the most part, all the native stuff can handle it. And this here top little bit is it is a buffered. I'm probably going to say this wrong. It's not as low a pH. There's plant available nutrition in this top stuff that there wouldn't be down below, even at the same pH, because the pH in the other subsoil, that soil isn't alive and bacteria and fungus growing that is feeding into the plant as much, right?
Did it rain here yesterday?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is still quite moist.
Yes.
I've noticed that if I do a lane like this, the germination and early growth happens a lot faster in shady areas than in sun-baked areas.
Oh, for sure.
And that's because of the moisture content.
And it's the same thing when I was saying, when I take my leaves off. So in the past, I would leaf blow all the leaves off of this, and I would come back, and another thing, the birds can find the seeds so much easier, and they'll just march right down here picking up all your stuff. But in the areas where I'd leave some sticks and leaves, it'd come in growing better, right? And again, it's just the experience of practicing. But I'll take half the leaves, 60% of the leaves off. But so I try to explain that to a landowner or a new helper, and every time they take every leaf off, they get like mesmerized with that leaf blower, right?
Yeah.
And next thing you know, I got to come back, put leaves back on. Well, where do I get them at? I've already blown them into the briars. Yeah, that's a problem. But anyways, so yeah, you can see it.
So where can a guy get these liquid fertilizers?
Oh.
I know you have a personal supplier, but
yes,
are there
I should have jumped back
commercial?
into that. So originally, when I first started with the liquids, right, Deer Grow, we had went.
I
went.
used that the last 2 years.
I went, and I think you might have been at the same one at Dr. Grant Wood's property, and he had liquid. He had Deer Grow guys there talking about using.
I wasn't at that.
Okay,
one, no.
talking about using the liquid calcium on native vegetation for deer, right? I thought, oh, wait a second here. This is interesting. So I called Deer Grow and order a whole tote, 275 gallons of the Deer Grow liquid calcium, right? So I drive all the way to Arkansas to get it. Well, it's Acre Grow is actually the company. Deer Grow is just a little thing that
they're putting a label on it and selling it to deer hunters.
Yeah, for a lot more money.
Yeah.
Right. So I get there and they load me up, and the guy from the warehouse comes out and hands me a hat and says Acre Grow on it. He says, "You know what I mean?" And so anyways, it's a cheaper product. Yeah. So I come back with that. I start using that, and then I was telling my client about it, and he says, "Man, I can get you better stuff than what they have." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, we can put whatever you want in it, up until it starts dropping out of solution, Yeah. And so we can mix up whatever you want." I said, "Huh?" I said, "So they got it, I think it was an 8% calcium solution. And we went with the 10 and added nitrogen to it, right? To where we get a double whammy jump, right?" But, so, yes, I get it. And so any like ag store, co-op, where you would buy, farmers would buy seed at or whatever, are going to have starter.
Agri-Grow brand,
well,
probably
Agri-Grow, but any type of a liquid seed starter
so just
fertilizer.
Looking at the content to make sure that there's sufficient calcium, like 8 or 10% calcium.
So
and nitrogen, or do you have to add the nitrogen?
So on mine, I was adding. They came in a mix, and I got a book, and I'm saying there's probably about 30 different mixes that you can come up with anyways, right? That's already established, or you could just, so what I had originally done, I got the 4-17-13, 4 nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and then I added boron.
What's the boron for?
All clover plots and alfalfa need boron. A clover plot will do way better with boron in it. I'm not for sure exactly. I know it helps on seed starting. I don't know what else boron does, but you cannot produce good alfalfa without it, and the same thing with clover. Iron is another big one that you need in. Sulfur is another big one, because we don't use as much coal in our power plants anymore, and sulfur is one that all plants need. But anyways, you can put too much in there and then get it falling out of solution, right? And
Right. You'll get granulation
in the bottom, and then you just have to keep
precipitation.
agitating that mix.
So you're I think kind of unique. I don't know how many other people are applying this in the way you are, because we're talking about a food plot lane right now.
Yeah.
But what you do is, and I you know, probably my main weakness in this business is in soil composition and the chemistry of how to amend the soils properly and all that stuff. But you've gone beyond that, because you're doing it for food plots, but also for native vegetation.
Right.
Yeah, which part of the reason that I put in food plots every year, and I put up to 50 a year, and when I had 3 properties. So I know how to put in food plots, but I don't have the technical knowledge of how to amend it to really get it to succeed. And part of the reason is because I've been concentrating on this stuff all these years, because I think you and I agree it's more important to have that stuff working for you than this.
It's way more important, and every one of the food plot companies that are major players in the seed industry will tell you the same exact thing.
Yeah.
They'll tell you that, but then the buyer forgets it.
Yeah.
You know, the Whitetail Institute said, hey, food plots is icing on the cake is what it actually is. You have to have, you know.
But you're upping the game to say, whatever you're doing to amend these soils and make this alfalfa and rye grow really well, do it to that.
Well, so when deer growth showed the calcium on the native vegetation, right? Then I started, wait a second. If I'm wanting them to follow this travel corridor, and I got the same native vegetation over here that I have here, and they believe, they've done their testing and saying it's attractive. I want everything that those deer want
to be
in this corridor.
Optimal.